You have to be willing to accept that this person makes the decisions for their life. In my head. Hello. If you're new here, I am Ryan Liberty. I do mental health videos Monday through Friday. May change, may not change, but that's what I'm doing. So if you're interested in mental health, hit that subscribe button now. Tonight we're going to talk about something that a subscriber actually asked, which was, what are some tips for people who are living with somebody who has mental illness? How can we support them? Maybe how can we handle ourselves? And that's a really interesting topic. I think a lot of people need help with that sort of thing, so that's what we're going to tackle tonight. Okay, the first thing when you are living with somebody who has a mental illness is to be clear on what your boundaries are. And boundaries are these invisible spaces where we decide what we're comfortable with and what we're willing to tolerate. That has nothing to do with the other person. We just need to be mindful of what we feel comfortable about, and we need to establish that, and we need to continually establish that over and over again. So we need to continually establish our boundaries, and this is because when we're around somebody who has a mental illness, we often find ourselves walking on eggshells. And what walking on eggshells means is what it sounds like, is that you're tiptoeing around the person, always trying to be careful about what you do, what you say, not to somehow tip that person into maybe suicidal ideology, or tip them over into a rage, or tip them into something that you don't want to deal with. So you walk around them, and in doing so, your boundaries kind of get set back a little bit more, until you don't have a say anymore, and you don't have boundaries, and then it starts to erode into your self-esteem, and you start to feel poorly about yourself. You may start to find yourself getting angry and hostile towards the person who has a mental illness. So the number one thing you want to do first and foremost is establish what your boundaries are, what you are willing to tolerate, what you are not willing to tolerate. Make sure that there are things that you're not willing to tolerate. Make sure they're communicated clearly. Make sure when somebody hurts you, you're clear about that, because you can't help somebody if you feel like you're always threatened, if you feel like you're always under attack, and you feel like you can't make a move without it revolving around the other person. The idea of enabling comes in because you lose yourself, and what you're basically doing when you lose yourself is teaching somebody how to not know how to deal with the world and not how to adapt to reality, and instead you're adapting to their perversion of reality. That's what you want to avoid. Alright, so another thing that you want to do is look for support groups or for information in general, and you want to be very cautious about where you're getting your information from, because there's a lot of crappy information out there about mental disorders that's based off of old studies, old information, and it's still being perpetuated even among the professional community. There are bad therapists out there, there are bad sources of information, places like Psychology Today, which is a magazine, but it's also an online website, or Psych Central. Sometimes they have good information, sometimes they do not. So you'll want to go to organizations that are credible. Things like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI would be one place that you might want to look. You can use things like Wikipedia to kind of point you in the right direction. If you really want to look into studies here in the United States, go to pubmed.gov or go to Google Scholar and look for studies, but also understand that it's not like a high barrier to making a study. People can do studies on anything. So people can create studies for any reason whatsoever, and they can come to conclusions based on faulty methods of studies, so also be aware of that. Basically, I find that if you get into a support group, multiple support groups would be preferential, because there is a groupthink mentality that comes with being in a support group, and sometimes people lose sight of things and they get things wrong. Any place that you go where it feels like somebody is shaming or stigmatizing, I would say get out of that support group, because even if it's not the disorder that you're looking for, if they're shaming another disorder, that's not going to be helpful to you, because there's no reason to shame any mental disorder. It really doesn't matter what it is. So you want to find kind people, supportive people, people who will listen, people who can point you in the right direction, people who have good information, and use them to start to come up with some kind of a plan for how you can help. Of course, you'll want to talk to the person who you're living with, if possible, and see if you can get them on board. Now, let's talk about that person for a second, because that person may have no interest in changing. They may have no interest in getting better, seeking treatment, and as I've stated in other videos here, and you can check those out, people don't always heal in the same time frame. People don't always heal in the same way. Treatments that may work for one person may not work for another person. People get very discouraged as they go through treatments and things are not working. So you have to just recognize that this person who you're living with, who has a mental illness, is a human being. And although on the outside, how they're presenting to you may not be very comfortable, they are still a human being and they are still in pain in some way underneath everything. So that's something to be aware of. And if you can talk to them, if you're able to talk to them and get them on board with learning about their illness and coming together with a treatment plan, that would be ideal, of course, but I know that's not possible in every situation. So what you got to do is look out for yourself. As I mentioned, number one priority is you. Get your boundaries straight. Make sure they don't take over and control your life. Don't enable them. There has to be consequences to the things that they do. If they're harming you in some way, you maybe need to kick them out of the home. If that's, you have to be able to do some of these things. They can't just take over your life. It's not helping anybody if that happens. So be prepared to have consequences. You need to have a private place in your own home where you can just be you, free from noise, free from disturbance. So make that clear. Make sure there's a lock on the door for whatever room that is. But remember that this is a human being that you're dealing with. I know that you may have known them for a long time and they may have harmed you for a long time, depending on what's going on with them. They may have harmed you outright, or they may have harmed you by watching them deteriorate into a lower mental state. But either way, they are still a human being and they deserve to be recognized as a human being. Now, if you're having a hard time because you see them deteriorating, again, don't enable them. Don't allow them to continue deteriorating. Try to get them on board for a treatment plan. And if they're not willing to do a treatment plan, you may have to lay down some consequences. And you have to be willing to accept that. You have to be willing to accept that this person makes the decisions for their life, and they may make a decision that's ultimately going to wind up with them ending their life. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. And I know that it's something that a lot of people don't want to face. But maybe if that's something that you're not able to face, that's where you need the outside support and you need extra resources. You may wind up needing to see a therapist yourself as a result of all of this, to be able to manage your own emotions, to be able to interact with this person. Sometimes a mediator helps. So maybe you can both see a therapist together and kind of discuss it together with them. There are family therapists that can handle these kinds of things. So that's just a whole smorgasbord of ideas out there for you to kind of think about. Basically, you want to make sure that you have support for yourself, because you're not going to be able to support that person if you can't support yourself first. You don't want to get sucked into their mental illness and then wind up having some kind of mental health problems yourself, because it's going to be that much more difficult for the both of you. And again, if you have a pre-existing mental illness yourself, you'll want to take care of that, because then, again, it's just going to be hard. It's going to be hard trying to manage both of you at the same time. So make sure you have friends that you can talk to. You may want to keep a journal or something to write down what's been going on, to make sure that you have everything clear. Some people with mental illness can be very manipulative and controlling, so if you write it down, then you don't have to question yourself and wonder what's going on. It's there and you can consult with it, and you have an accurate record of what was happening. You want to avoid gaslighting, basically, is what I'm saying. But take care of yourself, get the resources that you need, and help them to the best of your ability, and at the same time accept that they're only going to move forward with their mental health as much as they desire to, and you may need to set down some consequences to encourage them to do that. And at the same time, don't let them take over your life. If it gets to a point where they're taking over your life, they are putting you in harm's way, you may have to just get them out of your life, and sometimes that's just something that we have to deal with. I know that's painful, I know that's hard, but it's going to be better off for the both of you in the long run, because then you have the chance to go back to having a healthy life, and maybe you can help them from afar, and then they have the chance to question, why would this person do this to me, and maybe start to look into some of their own behaviors and what would make you want them out of their lives. So that is that. If you're new here, please hit subscribe. I do mental health videos Monday through Friday, maybe changing, I'm not really sure. Here comes a car. So hit subscribe, hit the bell if you want to get notified every time I do a video. And I do have a Patreon page if you're interested in supporting me. If you like the tips and stuff I give here, I do put extras up on there every now and then. You can throw a little bit my way and I would greatly appreciate that. Of course, I appreciate you being here. Now, before you go, I do want to talk to my subscribers. So I want to do some things a little bit differently with this channel. I mentioned this in the last video. I'd like to do more indoor things, which although difficult for me, I'm thinking I may be able to kind of finagle if I do it right. However, doing these things, I want to do them at a higher production value. I want them to be more higher quality and have good information for you. However, I also notice in myself that I slow down a lot when I do that because I get caught up in making sure I have everything right, and I feel like I need to know everything. Like I feel like I need to be a researcher in order to convey the information to you, because I know a lot of people will be watching these videos, at least in the future in my mind, and I want to make sure I have it right so that I don't have to constantly respond to questions or respond to criticisms. Like maybe if I mess something up, I don't want to have to continually correct, like, yeah, I know I messed up. This will be interesting to figure out how this process works, because I would like to do more of those more often. I am just learning how to frame it all out because this is a new thing for me. Every time I do something new on this channel, I don't know if you noticed, it rolls out kind of slowly. When I started doing these vlogs, I actually had a whole bunch of different ideas, and I did try one of them that I tried once and I decided wasn't good. I stopped the mental health breakdown because I didn't think that was going so well. So I do get a lot of ideas, and I do have big visions for this channel, and I do try to make it all about you and what you're looking for. I just ask for some patience and understanding while I get my ish together. Finally, if you have any tips for anybody who is going through this, who's living with somebody with a mental illness, I have certainly done it in my past. It is not easy, and I understand that, and I certainly could never capture everything that I wanted to in this video. Leave that down below in the comments for anybody who's watching, because we all can use any kind of help we can get. And on a final note, there is something going on around here starting tomorrow night, so I don't know if I'm going to have videos out. I'm going to do my best. We'll see how it goes. So thank you for tuning in as always, and I'll see you around, everyone. Take care.